Okay, so this is the Daf for Shabbat, May 10th, 2025. Do not watch this on Shabbat. Please watch it before or after. Okay, so we're at Daf 9, but I'm going to back up to the end of Daf 8. It says the Gemara challenges, but then let the external goat atone both for itself, that is for cases that it normally atones for, and for that which the internal goat normally does atone for. And the practical difference will be in a case of the defiling of the temple or sacrificial foods that occurred between the offering of this goat and that goat. If it occurs after the internal goat's blood presentation, then the external goat will effect atonement for it. The Gemara explains, the verse states, Aaron shall bring atonement upon its corners once a year, Exodus 30, verse 10. The emphasis on the term once a year teaches that this atonement for the specific case that it atones for should be only once a year. We're in Daf 9 now. According to the Mishnah, the internal goat atones for a case in which there was no awareness at the beginning, but there was awareness at the end. The Gemara asks, and according to Rabbi Ishmael, who says, for a case in which one did not have awareness at the beginning, but did have awareness at the end, that person is liable to bring an offering. For what does the goat whose blood presentation is performed outside the sanctuary atone? The Gemara answers, it atones for a case in which one did not have awareness, neither in the beginning nor in the end. The Gemara challenges this answer, but for that case, the goats of the festivals and the goats of the new moons atone. The Gemara explains, he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says, the atonement effected by all the goats offered as part the additional offerings, those of the new moons, the festivals, and Yom Kippur, is the same. They all atone for various cases of the defiling of the temple or its sacrificial foods. The Gemara asks, but if Rabbi Ishmael holds that the internal goat atones for a situation in which there was no awareness at all, with regard to what halacha does the Torah juxtapose the internal goat with the external goat? The Gemara explains the juxtaposition teaches that just as the internal goat does not atone for other transgressions, so too the external goat does not atone for other transgressions. Rather, they both atone only for the defiling of the temple or its sacrificial foods. The Mishnah teaches, for the defiling of the temple or its sacrificial foods, in which one did not have awareness, neither at the beginning nor at the end, the goats brought as sin offerings as part of the additional offerings of the festivals, and the goats brought as sin offerings as part of the additional offerings of the new moons atone. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara elaborates. Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, what is the reason of Rabbi Yehuda? The verse states, with regard to additional offerings of the new moons, and one goat for a sin offering to the Lord, Numbers 28:15. The final phrase, a sin offering to the Lord, the final phrase, which literally means a sin to the Lord, alludes to the fact that this goat atones for sin of which only the Lord is aware, where there was no awareness either at the beginning or at the end. The Gemara objects, but this phrase is necessary in order to expound it in accordance with the statement of Reish Lakish. As Reish Lakish says, what is different about the goat brought as a sin offering to the new moon, that it is stated with regard to it, it says, to the Lord, a term not written with regard to other offerings. The Holy One, blessed be He, says, as it were, this goat shall be an atonement for the fact that I diminished the size of the moon. The Gemara resolves the problem. If so, that is, if the phrase was needed only for that statement, let that verse state only a sin offering for the Lord. For what reason does it state to the Lord? In order to expound it in accordance with that which we have said, that it atones only for a sin that the Lord alone is aware of. The Gemara asks, but why not say that the whole of the phrase comes exclusively to teach this halacha and not to expound it in accordance with Reish Lakish's statement at all? The Gemara answers, if so, let the verse state a sin offering to the Lord. For which reason does it state to the Lord? You can conclude two conclusions from it. The Gemara asks, but let the goat atone even for other transgressions that a person never became aware of. Why does Rabbi Yehuda limit the scope of its atonement? The sages of the school of Rabbi Ishmael taught, since this goat of the new moon is brought at a fixed time, and that goat of Yom Kippur is brought at a fixed time, they must atone for similar transgressions. Just as that goat of Yom Kippur atones only for the defiling of the temple or its sacrificial food, so too this goat of the new moon atones only for the defiling of the temple or its sacrificial foods. The Gemara says, we found a source teaching that the goats of the new moons atoned for the defiling of the temple or its sacrificial foods. From where do we derive that the goats of the festivals also atone for such cases? And if you would say that this can also be derived in accordance with that which the sages of the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught, that suggestion can be refuted as follows. If you try to derive it through a comparison to the goats of the new moon, the comparison is flawed, as those goats are more frequent than those of the festivals. And if you try to derive it through a comparison to the goat of Yom Kippur, that comparison is also flawed, as that goat has a more extensive atonement, since it atones for all sins. And if you would say, don't we derive the atonement of the goat of the new moon through a comparison to the goat of Yom Kippur, and we did not refute it by saying that the atonement of the goat of Yom Kippur is more extensive, that is not relevant. There, with regard to the goat of the new moon, the basic fact that it provides atonement is written in the verse. As Rabbi Yehuda explains above, and the comparison to the goat of Yom Kippur is merely revealing a matter. That is, it teaches in what way its atonement is limited. But here, with regard to the goats of the festivals, the verse does not mention any details about atonement. So it is valid to say that we do not derive the entire matter from the comparison to the goat of Yom Kippur, as it provides a more extensive atonement. Rather, the atonement of the goats of the festivals is derived just as Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Hanina, says, in explanation of the opinion of Rabbi Meir, 10a, the matter is derived from the fact that with regard to the goat of the festivals, see Numbers chapters 28 and 29, the verses that mention the goat could have simply stated a goat, but instead state and a goat. Here too, the fact that the verse could have simply stated a goat, but instead states and a goat, indicates that the goats of the festivals are juxtaposed with the goats of the new moon, which are mentioned at the beginning of that passage, and teaches that they all affect a similar atonement. Just as the goats of the new moon atone only for cases in which one did not have awareness, neither at the beginning nor at the end, so too the goats of the festivals atone only for cases in which one did not have awareness, neither at the beginning nor at the end. A dilemma was raised before the sages. When Rabbi Yehuda says that the goats of the new moons and the festivals atone for cases in which one did not have awareness, neither at the beginning nor at the end, does that statement apply only to a sin that will never eventually become known, where no one was present when the person became ritually impure? But with regard to a sin that will eventually become known, it is considered to be like a case of one who has awareness of a sin at the end, and therefore only the goat whose blood presentation is performed outside the sanctuary in Yom Kippur itself atone for it. Or perhaps even with regard to a sin that will eventually become known, right now at least, before it becomes known, I can call it a sin of which only God is aware, and therefore the goats of the new moons and the festivals atone for it. The Gemara concludes, Tashema, come and hear a resolution of this dilemma, as it is taught in the Braita, for a case in which one did not have awareness neither at the beginning nor at the end, and it is a sin that will eventually become known, the goats of the festivals and the goats of the new moons atone. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah teaches, Rabbi Shimon says, the goats of the festivals atone for a case in which one never had awareness of his transgression, but the goats of the new moons do not. Rather, the latter atone for a ritually pure person who unwittingly partook of ritually impure sacrificial food. Okay, the Gemara elaborates. Rabbi Elazar says that Rabbi Oshaya says, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Shimon? The verse states, and he gave it to you to bear the sin of the congregation. Leviticus 10:17. And this verse is written with regard to the goat of the new moon, and its capacity to atone is derived from the front plate through a verbal analogy between the word sin in this verse and the word sin stated with regard to the front plate. The verse there states, and it shall be on Aaron's forehead, and Aaron will bear the sin of the sacred offering. Exodus 28:38. The verbal analogy teaches as follows. It is stated here with regard to the goat of the new moon, sin, and it is stated there with regard to the front plate, sin. Just as there in the verse in Exodus, the atonement is for a sin involving the ritual impurity of sacrificial meat, where such meat is placed on the altar. So too here in the verse in Leviticus, the atonement is for a sin involving the ritual impurity of sacrificial meat, where a ritually pure person partakes of it. The Gemara asks, If the two cases are to be compared, then one could take the comparison further. Just as there in the verse in Exodus, the atonement is only for meat that ascends upon the altar, so too here in the verse in Leviticus, the atonement is only for meat that ascends upon the altar. The Gemara rejects this suggestion. It is written with regard to the goat of the new moon to bear the sin of the congregation. This indicates that it atones for the personal sin of partaking of sacrificial meat that was consumed by an individual, which became ritually impure. The Gemara suggests, now the atonement of the goats of the new moon and that of the front plate are derived from one another by a verbal analogy. If so, let the goat of the new moon atone for itself, for cases that it normally atones for, and for that which the front plate normally atones for, and the practical difference will be in a case where the front plate was broken. The Gemara answers, the verse states with regard to the goat of the new moon to bear the sin of the congregation, which indicates that it bears or atones for only one sin, but it does not bear two sins. The Gemara suggests, but let the front plate atone for itself, the zitz, that the high priest wears. Those cases, for those cases that it normally atones for, and for that which the goats of the new moon normally atone for, and the practical difference will be in a case of the defilement of the temple or its sacrificial foods that occurred between the goat offering of this new moon and that new moon which follows. The Gemara answers, the verse states, with regard to the goat of the new moon, quote, and he gave it to you to bear the sin of the congregation, which indicates that it bears or atones for that sin, but another does not bear that sin. Okay, so Rav Ashi states another proof for the opinion that each atones in a different case. It is stated here with regard to the goat of the new moon, the sin of the congregation, which indicates that it atones for the sin of the congregation, but not for the sin involving sacred offerings. And there, with regard to the front plate, it is written, the sin of the sacred offering, which indicates that it atones for the sin involving sacred offerings, but not for the sin of the congregation. So the Gemara asks, we found a source for Rabbi Shimon's opinion about the goats of the new moons, that they atone for a ritually pure person who partook of ritually impure sacrificial food. From where do we derive this opinion about the goats of the festivals, that they atone for cases of the defilement of the temple, or its sacrificial foods, in which one did not have awareness, neither at the beginning nor at the end? The Gemara answers, it is derived just as Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Hanina, says in explanation of the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The fact that with regard to the goat of the festivals, the verses that mention the goats could have simply stated a goat, but instead state and a goat. This teaches that the goats of the festivals affect an atonement similar to that of the goat of the new moon that is mentioned at the beginning of the passage. Here too, the fact that the verse could have simply stated a goat, but instead states and a goat, teaches that the goats of the festivals affect an atonement similar to that of the goat of the new moon, which is mentioned at the beginning of that passage. And that's the end of Daf 9. Thanks for watching, listening.